Okay, time for an update on the regulation side of things, and we have a fantastic panel to take us through the regulatory side of the equation. Joining us is Pele Bokadal, since 2019, chairman of the High-Level Technical Policy Advisory Group, where he also represents Volvo Construction Equipment. Pele's been with Volvo for 24 years and held numerous leadership positions in all of the car, bus and truck divisions, most recently Construction Equipment Division, where you're the Vice President of Strategy, Architecture and Systems, as well as being responsible for global laws and regulations function. Welcome, Pele. Stefan Nilsson, welcome, sir. Great to have you with us. Chair of the CECE Technical Commission and Global Director of Laws and Regulations for Volvo Construction Equipment. Fantastic that you're here. Within Volvo, Stefan Nilsson is responsible for ensuring product safety and environmental compliance, as well as being the company representative at external trade association meetings and standard development bodies. He's heavily involved in the development of international safety standards and is a member of both the CEN and ISO working groups. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you, Malcolm.
Caio Lobo, welcome. CECE Technical Policy Manager. Currently, Caio works at CECE, where he's responsible for standardization of policy and safety regulated and horizontal technical legislation, thank you, such as the European legislation on machinery, road circulation requirements, radio equipment, noise emissions by outdoor equipment. He's a highly regarded specialist in internal market technical legislation and standardization policy. Welcome.
Thank you.
And rounding out the panel is Belen Bravo, CECE Technical Policy Manager. Since 2015, Belen works at CECE, where she's responsible for project teams focused on environmental areas such as chemicals, emissions and energy. She holds a master's degree in industrial engineering and a master's in environmental management. She's also spent 5 years working at the ArcelorMittal Research Centre in Belgium, in charge of new curing technologies, and she was also employed by the European Steel Association, where she's in charge of air quality and emissions best practice. A fantastic panel, highly experienced. You have a lot to tell us, so I won't hold you up. Pele, you're going to start the presentation?
I will. Thank you, Malcolm.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. And to begin with, I will actually frame it a little bit for newcomers and others who don't know how we network. And I will use a picture that we have on the CECE webpage showing the organization chart of CECE. And as you can see, it's a rather impressive amount of work groups, networks, etc., that we have built up over several decades, actually. And the core, the regulatory work is taking place in these areas which you see in red. So it's, of course, high involvement from the CECE office. We have a number of project teams. We have the technical commission, and we have the high-level technical policy advisory group with the longest name of all boxes here. And what do we do then? So first of all, starting with the high-level group, which comprises of executive managers from all concerned companies in EU, so you have OEMs and others there. We meet 2 times a year, some 30 members, and we are the advisory group on all kind of actions connected to strategic issues, where we need to think a little bit extra for our industry. We have the technical commission, which is chaired by Stefan, where we have experts, and it's both from companies and national associations. The technical committee meets 4 times a year. It has some 75 experts in there, and it's also the steering fora for the main activities of the project teams. Then we have 7 active project teams, and this is where really the work takes place. It includes technical experts from both companies and national associations. In total, some 330 experts. The project teams are following more than 20 technical files. I believe currently it's some 23. and really lots of things going on in there. And then at the end we have also very important, it's not only about Europe, it's also about international exchange with the rest of the world. So there are joint technical liaison meetings with yearly international exchange covering standardization, safety, environment, etc. So what do we do then? And in the high-level group last year, we introduced the so-called CECE Topicometer. We wanted to have one page to show the overall setup on the main topics. And we use this to a little bit feel the temperature. We have things that are on the radar, it's just cooking, and then it goes into some kind of political phase, and then preparatory phase, and then into legislative phase, and later on implementation. And we have 4 main areas which we group: digitalization, environment, market access, and safety. And we also consider then in the high-level group the strategic impacts on all these areas. For example, we have the European Green Deal, which is a very important driver. We have the circular economy. And lately we also got COVID-19, which impacts the industry from a strategic perspective, not only operational. But I will ask for some help here in order to go through the details. So Stefan, can you help me and talk to the details a little bit?
Absolutely, Pelle. I'll take over here and I'll take you through the details. But before we get into the overview of the topics that we work with, I want to tell you about the work that we're doing, and that we work in different ways depending on what the topic might be. So first of all, we work proactively, addressing needs of our members. When we want to introduce or we see a need for new legislation, then we approach the European Commission. We also follow up and provide technical input to the European Commission on already existing regulations and directives. We react to unforeseen issues that might occur among our members or in our surrounding environment. We do active lobbying on a lot of things, active advocacy, and a coordination with other associations as needed. We constantly monitor new regulations which might affect our industry sector. So I'd say that's the main work that we're doing. So in order to give you an overview of the details, I'll go into the various areas that Pelle just explained to you. So if we look here to start with the digitalization, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, I mean, these are areas that we foresee to be regulated in various regulations and directives in the future to come. We got data management. This is dealing with the non-personal data related to non-road mobile machinery. E-privacy is an existing regulation which is up for an amendment, and whatever comes into that amendment might have implications on our industry sector. Telematics. This is something that's been talked about all day, and here we are looking at worksite data exchange standards so that we can communicate with the machines and worksite management. Market areas, economic and industrial policies being monitored. Standardization is another important area for us, where we advocate harmonized standards to deal with the regulations in the directives and regulations. Trade issues. The most predominant trade issue for the moment is Brexit and what consequences this might have for all the manufacturers being members of our association. We move over to the environment. Chemicals is a very important area as well. For the chemicals, substance management, we know that we have a REACH regulation, which regulates substances of very high concern, which we need to keep track of as manufacturers. Circular economy, we have heard about the Circular Economy Action Plan that will come into play in the future to come. This we need to monitor very closely. CO2 and exhaust emissions is another area which we've been dealing with for many years now, but we expect more to come. Noise, There is an existing outdoor noise directive, which is up for revision. Low emission zones, again, back to the exhaust emissions. On national, regional level, there are local initiatives in order to reduce engine emissions. This we need to monitor as well. Waste, we will be talking about the Waste Framework Directive and what's been come along with that when it comes to the obligations to report substances of very high concern. Then we have the safety part, electric and electronics, where we deal with low voltage directive, electromagnetic compatibility directive, and radio equipment directive, for example. Machinery legislation, mainly the essential health and safety requirements that we need to monitor. And last but not least, road circulation, which is an initiative from the industry itself when it comes to creating harmonized road circulation requirements for Europe.
Thank you. And as you understand, there is a lot going on in the regulatory area. And we only have 27 more minutes, Stefan. And in the preparations of this, you and the team selected 4 main touch points to go through, and you had some reasoning around that. Which are those 4, and how do we do that?
Yeah, absolutely. And in order to show you the most important ones that we're dealing with and also give you a flavor of the different ways that we're working that I described earlier, we have selected 4 areas. So we will start with the road circulation and the state of play and the accomplishments being made in this area. Then we'll move over to the revision of the Machinery Directive, which is now coming into more stable phases. And then we're gonna show you an example of how we reacted to unforeseen circumstances when it came to the transition engines under the Stage 5 regulation. Then, last but not least, we're gonna tell you about the Waste Framework Directive and the obligation to report substances of very high concern in products being placed on the European market. But we'll kick off with the road circulation, and in order to do this, I'll ask Kayo to take us through the state of play when it comes to road circulation requirements.
Thank you very much, Stefan. So as Stefan mentioned, the first topic we're going to tackle is going to be road circulation. And why road circulation? Because we identified an issue. When exporting to different member states, construction equipment manufacturers are faced with 27 different homologation processes. And here what happens is that means costs for our industry. So that's why we identified that there is a gap in the European Union single market here. Because of this, CECE, together with other associations, we have been advocating and making some sort of awareness campaign to find ways to solve this gap, actually. What is happening now is the European Commission made up a survey on the cost and benefits analysis of this potential new legislation. We participated, we invited the industries we represent to participate on this as well. And the results of this is that there's general support for this new legislation on road circulation, including, for instance, 17 out of the 19 member states that answered this survey, they agree with this new legislation. The ones who did not agree, they mentioned issues, for instance, on setting up, the costs for setting up already with their own ministries, the homologation processes. Then there's also, and the findings of this study include, for instance, around 20% of reduction costs in compliance, which for our industry would mean around 1 to 1.3 billion euros in the period of over 10 years. So the conclusion of this study is basically that there is a need for an EU action here, and that's where we were acting. Because of this, we got together, as I mentioned, with different associations that also represent mobile machinery industries, and we set up what we call the Industry Task Force, the ITF. And here we have been working together to develop what we would see would be, from our point of view, from our perspective, the technical requirements for the road circulation of mobile machinery and towed equipment. Just to give you an overview on what we have done so far. We developed 2 documents, and one of them deals exclusively with the technical requirements for the mobile machinery themselves, and this one we sent already to the European Commission back in March 2019. And the second one deals with towed equipment, on the technical requirements on towed equipment, and this we sent in September this year. What this means, briefly, is that we have what we call a hybrid EU harmonized legislation, meaning we have a combination of the current system of type approval, but instead of doing those 27, let's say, different type approval processes, you would only have to do once in no matter how many member states you would like to export to. And also for the rest, for instance, for systems such as braking and steering, you would be looking into different approval procedures, for instance, based on the new legislative framework, depending, of course, on the complexity of those systems. The timeline we're looking here for the road circulation file is on the end of this year, so in the fourth quarter of 2020, we're expecting an open public consultation to which CECE and its members we intend to answer. Beginning of 2021, we hope to have a political validation from the Commission side and to continue with this initiative on this new legislation. And finally, we hope that in the third quarter of 2021, we're going to have a new proposal for this legislation on road circulation requirements.
Thank you, Kayo. Much progress made. And for you that are not familiar with this file, this is work that's been ongoing for a very, very long time. And here CECE is collaborating with other industry associations in what's called the ITF, the Industry Task Force. So appreciate that. Thank you so much. Now, let's move to the next area, the revision of the Machinery Directive. Here we already have an existing regulation, which is being revised. And here we interact. Can you please take us through the state of play when it comes to the revision?
Sure. It's exactly what you said, Stefan. Here we have a little bit of a different situation going on. Instead of us asking for a new legislation because we identified a problem, here what we have is there is already a political validation from the Commission side, as DG Jorna mentioned earlier in her speech. There is a will to address the effectiveness of the current framework for machinery, taking into consideration the current advancements in, for instance, artificial intelligence and new technologies. And here what's going on right now is the member states' authorities, together with other stakeholders, amongst them us, CECE, they are presenting their views on what they see would be feasible for this future legislation in different fora, discussions fora. We have been participating to those discussions, and because of that, together with our members, we developed an extensive position paper on the revision of the Machinery Directive back in May this year. What happens here is, as I mentioned, is an extensive document where we go into quite a lot of details regarding, for instance, again, the challenges of new technologies and how we currently do the risk assessment, taking into consideration those, but also special machines that are in the scope called partly completed machinery, and also a little bit on the format of instructions. It's a very good position paper available on our website. Here what we'll look at in terms of timeline is in the beginning of 2021, we foresee around March 2021, we're looking at the proposal for a new legislation. And here I wanted to share with you a little bit on the last things that happened in the revision of the Machinery Directive on this process. So we have what we call the report that was published on the impact assessment of the Machinery Directive. What happens here is that when they need to revise a new legislation, the European Commission hires a consultant and they do an independent assessment of what will be the possible policy options for the revision of this legislation. So here we selected the policy option findings that we wanted to mention just briefly for you. The first one would be, as I mentioned already before, addressing the new challenges posed by technological developments, and if it would be necessary, as you mentioned earlier as well, to adapt what we call the essential health and safety requirements. This deals exactly with digitalization, automation, and connectivity. Just to give a quick example, for instance, when they're looking at software and software updates here, the report feel that there is a need to further differentiate what would be small software updates, for instance, those that are aimed to fix small bugs in the machine, and those software updates that would potentially affect the safety of the machine. Our position here is quite simple. We have already been communicating with the Commission that we do not see the need to further adapt those essential health and safety requirements, reflecting already what was discussed in the report that was done with the evaluation of the Machinery Directive. We do believe that the Machinery Directive, as it stands, it is fit for purpose to take into consideration those advances in the technology. On the second policy option, they analyzed here a little bit of other topics that were identified during this evaluation process. And here I just want to mention the question of the partly completed machinery. For example, an excavator without its bucket and its arm would be considered a partly completed machine, and they would have to go through a special set of conformity assessment here. They're looking here specifically into either removing this concept or further adapting this concept to avoid the misuse. And here we we reflect quite well the findings of the report from the EC consultant, because we both agree that there's no need to remove the definition of PCM. It's very useful for our industry, and this we're quite aligned. The last two options here, they deal one with modifying Annex 4. And what is this? There is a certain category, a certain group of machinery that are included on the Annex 4. And for those, if you do not use, for instance, harmonized standards, what you're looking at is a mandatory third-party certification. What they're looking here is they want to either modify the machineries that are in this annex or modify the process of conformity, meaning we would need to either go through mandatory third-party conformity assessment and remove this possibility of using harmonized standards and self-certify of some sorts the machine. And the last policy option, this one there's not a lot of discussion because we all agree here, is that we would be looking into converting the directive as it stands right now, the machinery directive, into a regulation, so the machinery regulation. And here we're pretty much all in line because this would mean that when the member states will not need to transpose this legislation, meaning less issues with the common interpretation. So this would be very beneficial to us, we believe.
Thank you, Kayo. Now, this is a very important file for us, and CECE is a recognized stakeholder in this revision and in very close contact with the European Commission. CECE is also a member of the machinery expert group, which is actively working on the content of this revision. So, thank you, Kayo, for your in-depth presentation of the revision of the Machinery Directive.
Thank you, Stefan.
Now we change the pace a little bit, and we're going to talk about unforeseen events. So CECE, together with other associations, reacted to unforeseen events where we saw problems with the transition period for engines under the Stage 5 emission regulation. So if I could ask you, Belen, to take us through the advocacy and collaboration work in order to resolve the issue.
Thank you, Stefan. I'm going to present you an overview of the file of Stage 5, extension of the transition period that, as Stefan says, was a priority for our members and for CECE this year. So Regulation 1628 is called Stage 5 on engine emissions from non-road mobile machinery, foreseen a call it transition period. This means a period of time where machines fitted with engines that are from the previous stage, that is Stage 5, for instance, Stage 4, can still be produced and placed in the market. As you see, this regulation is very broad because it covers all the non-road mobile machinery. It means not only construction machinery, but also rail, also water vessels. Therefore, with this broad range, the regulation has been adapted in this transition period to all the needs and specificities of each of the cases, and also considering the different size of the engines and different power ranges. Therefore, in the particular case of those engines with lower power than 56 kilowatts and above 150 or equal 150 kilowatts, the deadline to end this transition period was 30 June this year, and to place for the production of the machines with these call-it transition engines. Then placed on the market, the deadline was the end of this year. Therefore, due to the COVID-19 outbreak that caused supply chain disruptions, factory closures, in February already we knew from our members that they were not able to produce the machines. Essential components like hydraulics or tires was missed. Therefore, those dates were not able to be met. Quickly, CECE, together with other industry associations in March, reacted and come together to ask officially to the European Commission for an urgent postponement of those deadlines. In parallel to that, advocacy actions and requests for support were launched vis-à-vis of the European Council and European Parliament. This allowed for a table of amendments from the Commission 10 weeks later, and a full support for what is called urgent procedure. As a result, we have the Regulation 2020-1040 that amends the Stage 5 regulation, and that was published on 17 July on the official journal. This new regulation provides 12 months of extension of the transition period for those deadlines from 2020. As the publication took place later than the deadline, The ACE was applicable retroactively from 1st July 2020. These amendments was very welcome by members, as this provided the certainty for the production that was needed for the already bought engines. Now go more into details. This is not an exhaustive list, as I said before. The regulation is pretty complex, so you have other areas and other type of engines. But for the ones that construction machinery is concerned, you can see that the amendments of this regulation cover only transition engines variable or constant speed that are in the power categories below 56 kilowatt and upper than or equal 130 kilowatts. It grants, as you can see in the red dots, 12 months extension to the deadline for completing the production of machines in which transition engines in the above power categories are installed, and also 12 months extension to the deadline for placing those machines and the transition engines installed on the market. Other cases in the regulation were considered. As I said before, there was small volume manufacturers that have a particular case where they have longer period in the transition period where the deadlines is for 2021. Same case for mobile cranes or snow throwers. The rest of the engine powers, the one that are in the ranges between 56 and 130, there in the original regulation, they were already having the deadlines for 2021, even in some cases for 2022. Therefore, they were not amended. This is a very complex regulation. At the end, it's just we wanted to highlight which has been changed. But if you have any question of doubt, don't hesitate to contact us.
Thank you, Belen, taking us through this work done. And this is a prime example of how collaboration and quick advocacy resolve the issue with these transition engines. And now we're gonna take a look at what I consider to be the most urgent matter on our agenda today. And this is the reporting obligation of chemical substances into the European database SCIP. So what's SCIP then? Well, SCIP is the database for information of substances of concern in articles as such or in complex objects, which is considered to be products, established under the Waste Framework Directive. And why is it urgent then? Well, as of the 5th of January next year, companies supplying articles containing substances of very high concern in a concentration of 0.1% weight by weight on the European market have to inform these articles to the European Chemical Agency known as ECHA. So this has then been considered to be a major problem. So raised concerns by several different or many different industry sectors for several reasons. But what's being done then is ECHA is entitled to create a database, provide access to the database, and then provide information to waste operators and also consumers and other interested parties. Now, these concerns that we've been talking about needs to be a bit clarified. So for this reason, I will ask Pelle to take us through what these concerns are and how we plan to address them.
Thank you, Stefan. And I'll walk over here. And as Malcolm kindly introduced me, I've been in the Volvo Group for 24 years in different positions within product development. The last 6 years, I've been responsible for a function called Strategy, Architecture and Systems, where we deal with laws and regulations, we deal with product architecture, we deal with IT systems connected to product development and keeping track of the products over the lifetime, and also actually checking compliance. And when ECHA came with their specification of the database, which you find here, you can also find it on the Commission web pages, I started to get really concerned. And I will explain why. Because in my company, Volvo Construction Equipment, we have more than 500,000 part numbers in production and in the aftermarket, so active part numbers for our customers. And our engineers develop some 30,000 new part numbers every year, when we are developing new products for automation, connectivity, or regulatory updates, or just expansion of our offer. And ever since Volvo took on the environment as one of the core values in 1973, that's 47 years ago, we have been actively, together with our suppliers and our engineers, chasing substances of very high concern. So this is the current list of substances of very high concern that we have in Volvo Construction Equipment. You can find it on our dealer portals. It's available for our customers, dealers, and next users according to the REACH framework, and we have a rather good track of this. It's not very thick. But these new requirements then from ECHA, they impose a little bit more work on us. So when we are going to produce one machine, and this is a Lego wheel loader, it happens to have 2,543 part numbers in it, which is actually quite representative for a real wheel loader. It's some 2,000 to 3,000 parts, depending on specifications. We have to, of course, choose out of our 268 different models that we have, and we take the recipe. And those of you who have played around with Lego, you know how it works. You have a bill of material of an excavator, or in this case then a wheel loader. And we need to merge this information with this information. So for every produced machine, we need to provide ECHA with a dossier of information that will be this big. This is 2,500 papers. There are 43 missing. And then some will say, but you don't need to report where we don't have substances of concern. Well, the problem is, in order to know that we don't have substances of concern, we need to check. So it's really going from here to here. But it's even worse. It's not only one pile, it's 20,000 piles of information. And on top of this, and this is where I get really goosebumps, there are requirements in the database which are clearly outside the legal framework and not connected to the REACH obligations at all. And one of these little details is ECHA wants us to report the tax codes for every single sheet here, every single part number, the tax codes. And in Volvo we have 22,000 tax codes. So depending on if I have a part, let's say an oil filter, going as a spare part from Germany to Sweden, this has one tax code. If it's an oil filter which is a part of a machine going from France to Spain, it has another tax code. And we have to write that tax code down there on every single paper, and we have 20,000 of these piles. There are other concerns in here, since this pile of information will of course contain the product structure and information on the product structure. We are giving away information on product structures, our supply chains, and you can also check our volumes in production, which is actually a thing we are not allowed to disclose until we do our formal financial reporting. So there are several things in here which has not been thought through, and all of it is connected to the fact that there has been no impact assessment done together with industry. This is a key issue. So what are we doing then? We are lobbying hard on this. And CECE, we have had direct connections with the development team in ECHA. We have had direct connections with several of the executive members in the Commission. We were, frankly speaking, a bit disappointed with the results out of a high-level meeting that we had in July. And we decided, together with several other industry organizations, that we need to take it to the highest level. And what we did then after vacation here, we said that we need to really revise this. We need to have a view on the impact assessment. We're also quite clear that ECHA have not met the legal deadlines. The database should have been in place in January this year. We're in October now, and it's still not available in production, which gives us in the industry, and it's all industries producing parts, less than 2 months to actually deliver all those hundreds and thousands and millions of part numbers. And on top, we have the COVID situation, which doesn't make things easier, unfortunately. So we're asking for a postponement of a year, and we do this through, we have written a letter to President of the European Commission, Mrs. Ursula von der Leyen. We're asking her to postpone the deadline. We did it in a very simple and straightforward way together with key organizations, ASEA, Orgalim, and so on. And we actually achieved no less than 40 signatures from more or less all major EU and non-EU organizations in the world. We're also taking this to the next level. We are preparing for information to the presidency of the council, and we're also preparing for individual debates with concerned members of parliament and so on. So high pressure from our side, but the message is also to all of you out there that you should look into this and raise your concerns. I'm pretty sure that you have issues more or less everywhere also, not only my company.
Thank you, Pelle, for this in-depth explanation of why we have concerns in the first place, and also on the impressive advocacy work that we're doing, and the backup that is behind this from all different associations. Very well. So, but as started out in this presentation, there is much, much more. I mean, we have the roadmap for the European Green Deal and Circular Economy Action Plan, which is quite important for us. We got artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, initiatives on emission regulations and alternative fuels. We got the digital single market and European data policy. We got the internal market and market surveillance, which will change the playing field for economic operators. So we have a lot of challenges to take on. And I urge you, if you want to get involved, you're more than welcome to participate in the work that we're doing here. So what you need to do is to express your interest to your national member associations and get a nomination to get to work in the project teams and also in the technical commission. So this pretty much concludes the information material that we had today. And if there are any questions, I will provide you with the contact details in order to reach the CECE staff in order to get your questions answered. So, thank you for your attention, and I'll hand the word over to you, Malcolm.
Thank you so much for the presentation. If I can invite all the panelists back on stage, please. Look, a fantastic presentation, and Pelle, of course, your presentation is showing exactly the kind of bureaucratic problems we can run into. I mean, this is, from 10 pages to 2,500 is astonishing. But quick question is, what happens if companies do not submit the information on time to this SCIP database? Currently,
that's a very interesting question, because we actually don't know. Due to the lateness in the development of this, several member states have not transposed the legal requirements in the same way. So the SCIP database is not mandatory in all states. And if you compare with, for example, GDPR, where it was clearly written that a company could be charged with up to 4% of its turnover, there are no figures and indications like that. So we need court cases in order to know how much this could cost, right? And so we don't know. Mm-hmm. And I mean, where we want to drive this is we don't want to just say no. We are a part of the problem, and we are also developing now in a separate task force an alternative solution which is much more efficient, where we can actually track this information and make it available and useful for the waste operators. I want to have that said as well.
Yeah. Quick question for Kyle. We've been talking a lot about digitization and digital transformation today, technology coming in. So what is the position of CECE regarding cybersecurity requirements in the machinery directive?
Thank you, Malcolm. That's actually a very good question because we didn't touch that much. But simply put, our position is that the machinery directive deals with safety of our machines. And cybersecurity requirements are in another category that we indeed believe it is security. Because of this, cybersecurity, the risks of having cybersecurity attacks in our machine, we do not see them as a risk of the safety of the design of the machinery, for instance, but more about of the malicious attack in our own machine. So because of this, we do see that it's better to have it in a separate legislation, let's say a horizontal legislation, because there's also risks if we tackle this issue in the machinery legislation, there's going to be an uneven interpretation across the board when it comes to different sectors. So we do think it's beneficial to have a horizontal legislation dealing with this.
Okay. Berlin, we had a question, which is where can companies check the amendments by type of machines with regards to the stage 5 postponement?
Yeah, well, by type of machines will be more by type of engine. So it's needed to be checked the type of engine used in the machine. And then for this, I invite to consult the publications in the CECE web. We have an FAQ on stage 5 that will be soon amended with much more information on that. CECE members already received explanatory notes already in July, but with this kind of summaries. But you have any questions, we can help us.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Stefan, the last question to you came in from the viewers. Thank you very much. Is what, besides digitalization, what is the main topic today that you're really, working with and are challenged by?
What we really want to focus on is to get regulations and directives that are not contradictory to each other. Since there are ongoing revisions in several places and new regulations being developed, we don't want to see silo effects where we have similar requirements, such as for cybersecurity or artificial intelligence showing up in different regulatory frameworks, because this could be quite devastating. We also want to ensure that we have harmonized standards supporting the directives and regulations in order for us to be able to do the self-assessment and self-declaration of the products.
Great. Well, I just want to thank you all for being here. It's fantastic to have such great, experience, knowledge, and wisdom working on these problems on behalf of the industry. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Malcolm.
Malcolm.
Thank you.